Welcome to Lesson 7, Working with Entities. In this chapter, we're going to look at how the SDK allows you to manipulate entities in code. So, this chapter, and together with the next 5 lessons, we're looking at different types of coding patterns that are used within coding in the SDK. And the first one, as we said, we're going to be looking at are entities, working with data. And the way we work with data can be done in a basic way, looking at the entity directly, as opposed to in config tools, where you can only update data through the business object or business service. Here you can directly use the entity itself. And the way you actually update and deal with the data and make changes to it is can only be done through a particular class called the data transfer object. You can go directly to the entity to select and read data, but if you want to actually make updates to that data, then you have to do that through the data transfer object, the DTO. So here's a few different ways that we deal with the data, and we'll see these patterns again and again when we look later on in a few lessons' time at the actual code. There is a class in its own, which is the ID class, and we'll take an example with a person ID. And you normally create the class by actually putting in the value of the ID value as a string, and you return the ID. And once you have the ID, you can call getEntity to get the entity class. So once you have the entity, you're able to actually then read the data and so on. However, if you want to update the entity, you can't do that by directly using the entity class. You have to do that, as I mentioned before, through the DTO. And the second example below shows you how through the entity you can call getDTO, and then on the DTO you can set the different properties. And once you have completed doing that, you would have to update that by calling setDTO. If you want to add a new entity, then you need to actually call new entity. First of all, you have to do that through the DTO as well. So you can either create a new DTO class by calling createDTO, or through the ID again, you can get the new DTO. Once you have a DTO class, you can then set the properties and then call eventually new entity, and that actually will create a new row in the database. A new persistent data row in the database. So that's the way you're going to be dealing with that. Okay, so that's the first pattern that I want to show, and we will doing something similar for the other types of patterns in the next few lessons.